Welcome everybody. We're going to take a look at the design that we did during our open house. But we're going to take a look at a much more in-depth and technical level. This will be some of the information that we'll be going over during our new Rock Your Automatic 3-day class. It'll go from the basics all the way to advanced, and in the advanced section we'll be doing both simulated process and 4-color process. So this design was a 7-color simulated process. So to begin with, we'll just go quickly as far as the art. This right is a 60 LPI. It is at 22.5 degree angle, and it is an ellipse shaped dot. So whether you're doing film output, CTS, those are our base information, and it is 7 colors. All 7 screens are the same mesh count. They're all going to be 230 mesh. Unlike when you're doing vector printing, sometimes you can go higher mesh counts with your darker colors, lower mesh counts with your lighter where you're trying more opacity, etc. Here we're wanting to lay down all the same amount of ink. Even our underbase. Now one can argue, some people do run a lower LPI and a lower mesh count on their underbase. Yes, you can, but there's no reason why you cannot print on automatic. You should be able to print white ink through a 230 mesh. You're actually sacrificing detail if you drop it down to a 45 LPI, so a 155 mesh on there. So we want to have everything the same because we want to put the same amount of ink on each of our colors, including our highlight white. So they're all 230 mesh. All these are going to be running in the mid to high 20 Newton range. Okay, on the coating, they are all coated the same. They're coated 2-in-1 at about a 4-second stroke with the sharp edge of the scoop coater. We want to have an EOM, an emulsion over mesh, roughly about 15%. If you were to put too thick of an emulsion deposit, get too high of an EOM, let's say above 20%, when you're actually printing wet on wet, that thicker stencil will give us a taller dot. And then when the colors are coming down on top of it, we increase our chance of getting dot distortion or dot gain, where we're just smashing the dots and they just become fat and you actually lose detail. And we don't want to lose detail, we want to gain detail. That's why we are printing wet on wet. The white ink, we're going on head number 1. All of the flood bars are running at 20 degrees. If you're running a wing flood bar 20 to 25 degrees, in my opinion, is the best, keeping the flood bar flat. We are running at 15 degrees on our squeegee. On the pressure, we're running here at about almost 70 psi. And on the side here, you'll actually have numbers. And we're running at about a 1/4 inch on the squeegee, and then it looks to be about 1 inch on the flood bar. Yeah. So we'll start the image printing. And we're just going to run one on, one off. Oh, wrong position. Okay, so now we're just going to print one shirt. We're coming around, we are flashing it. We are using the Rock flash. This is a smart flash, so it is actually reading the temperature. Now on the red, if you'll look here, we're running at about 60. We don't need as much pressure. Down here, once again, we are running it at the 15 degrees. Same angle. All the colors now we're running at the same speed, same angle, same pressure. I want to put down the same amount of ink. These are simulated process colors that are manufactured just for running with the Separation Studios. So they are highly pigmented, medium viscosity. And we're running the gray. And now we're going to come around to the highlight white. The highlight white is the same white that we're using in the first screen. Only difference is we've added about 10% curable reducer to it just to make it thinner. I do not want to run as much pressure on here because I don't want to run the risk. We're running at the 60. On here, I don't want to run as much pressure because I do not want to come down on top of all of those wet dots and smash and smear the dots. I want to keep everything to be as crisp and as clean of an image as possible. Let me stop. So another variable that we have to control is going to be off contact. All of the screens are set at 1/16 of an inch. On the rock, you can actually set front and rear. So we have both of them set at 1/16 of an inch, about the thickness of a quarter. The screen comes down, there's a very small gap, almost like a snare drum. If you touch it, you can just barely feel the distance between it, because we want to make certain that our off contact, once again, is consistent. If you have too high of an off contact, takes too much pressure, and also your registration can shift, and you have trouble getting ink to clear the screen. And if the off contact is too low for that mesh tension, then you have the problem that the ink does not clean the screen as the squeegee travels. The mesh actually lays in the ink. When it lifts up, that it picks it up. The higher your tension, actually the lower your off contact can go on here. But in the mid-20s and anything else, 1/16 of an inch is ideal. Unsung hero of process printing is going to be micro registration. If you hate micro registration, process printing is not for you. Or get a CTS system or a pre-registration system, because with process printing, you want to have your registration as tight as possible. This is not like vector printing where you're going to have a half-point choke, and you may be using a half-point, even a 1-point registration mark. And here you need to be using a half-point. I suggest quarter-point registration marks, and you need to be as close as possible. The tighter you get the registration, it's just like taking a photograph. If you take a photograph and you're slightly out of focus, the image still looks good. It just doesn't look great. And we can come in here and we can take a look, and we can see that these are 7 colors. But even up here, where the little tiny registration marks and then the word registration, template, 60 LPI, it's a little fuzzy, but it's still readable. But there are 7 colors, layers of color on top of that tiny text and these small registration marks. You want to get the registration as tight as possible. Tighter it gets, the more in focus, the crisper, the sharper the image. So as you see, there are so many ways or opportunities doing process printing for things to go awry. And that's why you have to do an exposure calculator test. Okay, if you're using a 1-part pure photopolymer emulsion, because you're hitting something 3 inches high does not mean that your exposure is on point. You can be off 150, 300, even 500% and still hold something with a high-end emulsion that's 3 inches high. Here we're trying to hold something that is 1/60 of an inch in diameter, 60 LPI dot, something extremely small. You have to get your exposure calculator time, your exposure time down pat, because if not, you're going to lose the information on here. So every step of the way, we have to control the variables. Now we'll take a look at our final, our print sample. So we'll take a look at our print sample. And we can look at if the entire image is not bright enough, the colors just don't have enough pop. The entire image, not one certain color, but the entire image, We then go back and we look at our underbase, and we adjust our print parameters, our speed, our angle, our pressure, or the number of strokes to put down a little more white. When you're printing simulated process, we do not need a bright white. All we need is a nice off-white, because we're printing with opaque colors on top. We're stacking on top. It's not like when you're doing a 4-color process, we're using transparent colors. So we won't be able to see the underbase, but the underbase will affect how bright our entire image is. This is a muted image. It's only supposed to be bright in the center on here. So our underbase is fine. From there, we then go back and we look at our colors. If our red, for example, if our red was not bright enough, I wanted more red, but you can see how bright it is in the lips and the orange explosion. Red's fine, but if I wanted that brighter, I would go back and I would adjust the print variables on that red screen. Speed, go to a slower speed, a little more angle, or an additional stroke, or a little more pressure on here. Once again, I want to watch pressure. I do not want to get crazy with the pressure. Too much pressure will actually cause you to get dot distortion, and dot distortion, you will lose information instead of gaining more information. Because remember, we are printing wet on wet. People ask all the time about printing sim process. Can I flash between every color? You can, but you won't get as good of a print. Your first 6 to 12 prints off on sim process are not your best prints. We actually are looking for the colors on the back of the screen, that buildup, that very fine buildup. The colors will begin to blend and giving us a wider color gamut, deeper colors. We actually want that. Flash between every color, you can, but then you're actually limiting your image. So it does take a little more finesse. If we needed more green, more blue, etc., we'd go back and adjust that final color. Then anything that I'm looking for white, if it's not white enough, that is the job of your highlight white. We would then come and we would adjust the highlight white. You can see here through the screen how the buildup is extremely, insanely detailed. It looks just like the frickin' print because it is an impression. It is a stamp of the print. That screen came down, it actually picked up all those wet colors. So if my whites were not white enough, I would then adjust this to get the entire image to where I want it. Fortunately, on an automatic press, once you have got it dialed in, it is much easier to control than on a manual press where you try to control all of these variables by eye or by hand. On here, we'll actually be doing simulated process and 4-color process in the advanced portion of our Rock Your Automatic class. We're very excited about that. It is going to be the end of June, so check it out at colormatrix.com or give us a call, 800-935-2121. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please give us a like or a share, and as always, God bless.